Two bodies, same era, opposite ends of the earth. One is wrapped in 300 yards of resin-soaked linen and sealed behind granite doors built to outlast the sun itself. The other is stacked on a pyre of sandalwood and set alight before the sun even sets, the ashes scattered into a river before anyone has time to grieve properly. You could have been born into either death, same fear, same body, same ending, for a while at least, before the two paths split completely. So why did some ancient civilizations spend fortunes and lifetimes trying to keep a body intact forever, while others rushed to destroy it as fast as physically possible? Start with Egypt, because the numbers are almost absurd. A single high-status mummification took 70 days, not because the process was slow, but because it was ritual. 40 days just to dry out the body with natron salt, the rest spent wrapping, praying, and sealing. The organs came out one by one through an incision barely long enough to fit a hand, except the brain, which was pulled out through the nostril in pieces because nobody in 2600 BC had figured out a cleaner way to do it. The heart stayed in the chest. Egyptians believed it would be weighed against a feather in the afterlife, and a body without a heart couldn't be judged at all. Now, put that next to the Hindu funeral rites still practiced today, rooted in traditions over 3,000 years old. Cremation, ideally within 24 hours of death, no preservation, no waiting. The body is considered a temporary shell the moment the soul leaves it, and the faster it burns, the faster that soul is released to move on. Holding on to a corpse isn't reverence in this worldview, it's an obstacle. Two civilizations staring at the exact same problem, a body that used to be a person, and arriving at completely opposite conclusions about what respect for the dead actually looks like. The gap gets even stranger when you zoom out further. In the Andes, the Chinchorro people were mummifying their dead 7,000 years ago, 2,000 years before Egypt even started, using clay, ash, and animal skin to rebuild bodies from the inside out, including infants and stillborns, on the theory that everyone deserved to remain among the living. Meanwhile, across the Norse world, ship burnings sent the dead out on flaming vessels, the smoke itself treated as the vehicle carrying a warrior into the next life. One culture rebuilt the body atom by atom, another turned it into smoke in purpose in minutes. By any modern instinct, one of these had to be the right way and the other a strange detour, but that's not how any of this worked. These weren't competing techniques trying to solve the same equation. They were entirely different beliefs about what a body even was after death, a vessel worth preserving or a shell worth releasing, and the ritual was just the visible proof of that belief.
Here's the paradox worth sitting with before we go further. Every single one of these cultures was terrified of the same thing: death, the unknown, the fear of a person simply ceasing to exist. And that identical fear produced two civilizations that couldn't have handled a body more differently if they tried. So what actually decided which path a civilization took? It wasn't randomness. It came down to one question every culture had to answer for itself. Is the body still needed after death, or is it just packaging? Egypt answered that question with a resounding yes, the body is needed. Their entire afterlife system depended on it. Egyptians believed a person carried several souls, the Ka, a kind of life force, and the Ba, which could travel, but always needed to return home to the body at night, like a bird flying back to its nest. If the body decayed or was destroyed, the Ba had nowhere to land, and the person's existence in the afterlife simply ended, permanently. That belief is carved directly into the pyramid texts at Saqqara, dated to around 2400 BCE, some of the oldest religious writing on Earth. So preservation wasn't vanity, it was infrastructure. Keeping the body intact was the only way to keep the soul functioning forever, which is why pharaohs poured national resources into tombs built to survive millennia, because in their belief system they had to. Now flip to cultures built on reincarnation, and the entire calculation reverses. In the Vedic tradition, dating back over 3,000 years and documented in the Rig Veda, the soul isn't tied to one body at all. It's a passenger, and this life is just one ride among many. Cremation, in that framework, isn't destruction, it's release. Burning the body severs the soul's last attachment to a form it no longer needs, freeing it to be reborn. Holding on to a corpse doesn't protect the soul, it traps it. It's the same split you still see today, just dressed differently. Think about it like phone storage. One person backs up every photo forever, terrified of losing a single file. Another deletes everything constantly, convinced holding on to the past just clutters the present. Same technology, same fear of loss, completely opposite instinct on what to do about it. Mummification and cremation are that same instinct, just written in linen and fire instead of code. And here's the wild part almost nobody expects. The Egyptians and the Vedic cultures weren't operating in ignorance of each other's existence forever. Trade routes eventually connected these worlds, spices and goods moving across the very regions where these funeral rites lived side by side for centuries. Two civilizations, close enough to trade goods, worlds apart on the one thing that mattered more than any trade good ever could.
Then there's a third answer to the same question, and it has nothing to do with religion at all. Sometimes the land itself decided. Look at the Chinchorro again, on the edge of the Atacama Desert in modern-day Chile, mummifying their dead as early as 5000 BCE, the oldest deliberate mummification tradition ever discovered, predating Egypt by 2,000 years. Researchers like Bernardo Arriarza, who spent decades studying these bodies, point to something environmental sitting underneath the ritual. The Atacama is one of the driest places on Earth. Bodies left in that sand didn't just decay slowly, they mummified naturally, on their own, without anyone doing anything at all. The Chinchorro didn't invent mummification out of pure theology. They were staring at nature doing it for free, and they built a belief system, and eventually an entire craft, around a process the desert had already started. Compare that to somewhere like the Ganges floodplain, humid, dense, and full of bacteria working around the clock. A body left exposed there doesn't slowly mummify, it's gone in days. Cremation, in that climate, isn't just spiritually correct, it's the only practical option that actually works before decomposition takes the choice away entirely. Belief and environment weren't fighting each other. In a lot of places, they were pointing in the exact same direction. But underneath all of it, the ritual, the chemistry, the climate, there's something else worth pausing on, because it's easy to miss when you're this deep in the mechanics. Both practices, at their core, come from the same instinct. Nobody wanted to let go carelessly. The Chinchorro didn't stop at mummifying elites and warriors. They mummified infants, stillborns, babies who never lived long enough to contribute anything to the group at all, wrapped and preserved with the same care as a grown adult. That's not a survival strategy. That's grief, 4,000 years before anyone wrote the word down. And on the other side, cremation rites weren't cold or dismissive either. In Hindu tradition, the eldest son traditionally lights the pyre himself, and the ashes are carried, sometimes for hundreds of miles, to be released into a sacred river, not abandoned, but personally, physically returned to something larger. We couldn't stop death, so some cultures held on as tightly as chemistry allowed. We couldn't stop death, so other cultures let go as completely as fire allowed. Both were acts of love. They just pointed in opposite directions. Zoom out far enough, and mummification and cremation stop looking like opposites. They're the same question, asked by every human group that ever lost someone. What do we owe the dead? One answer was permanence, the other was release. Neither was wrong. They were just built on completely different ideas about what a soul needed once the body stopped working. And here's what's almost funny about where we ended up. Modern embalming, the stuff funeral homes still do today, descends in a direct line from Egyptian preservation techniques, chemicals swapped in for resin and natron.
Meanwhile, cremation, once a minority practice in most of the Western world, is now the majority choice in countries like the United States and the UK. The ritual that used to be the other option quietly became the default. Which means, somewhere along the way, without anyone announcing it, we ended up doing a little of both. We kept the ashes, we just stopped needing the body to still be inside them.